What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Move Rewind. Welcome to another video, and today I am doing a series ranking of the BBC school-based drama Waterloo Road. Now I am someone who grew up with Waterloo Road. I'm a massive fan of the show and I still watch it to this very day. And I've been on a bit of a Waterloo Road marathon recently, and I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to do a tier ranking of the series because there's 14 series of the show and they're not all the same quality, so I thought, you know what, why not, let's do it. Now, a few disclaimers before we get into this video. Firstly, this is my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased just like anyone else, so please bear that in mind. Secondly, this video will contain spoilers for Waterloo Road, so if you haven't seen the show, I would highly recommend watching it before you watch this video. And thirdly, please feel free to comment your own ranking down below. I always like hearing your opinions. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with Series 1, the one that started it all. I'm going to put Series 1 in the S tier. I think Series 1 is one of the strongest series of the show. The school has the atmosphere of a failing institution. Series 1, it really does feel like a school that's on its last legs and at risk of closure. And I have to say, in Series 1, they really do capture that. All the teachers and students are well developed. I think anyone who has been to a school in the UK can recognise the kind of teachers there are. You've got the hard as nails head teacher Jack Rimmer. You've got the very strict deputy Andrew Treneman. And then you've got more lazy teachers like Grantley Budgeon and useless teachers like Steph Haydock. Every teacher in this show feels like a teacher that you have encountered at some point in your life. And I think a lot of the storylines are very well done as well. I especially like the threat of school closure because it's one of those storylines which brings the whole cast together and they all have to fight for the school's survival. And plus, when you find out by the end of the series that the school is saved, it is a very feel-good moment and a very optimistic note to end the first series on. And I have to admit, a lot of the storylines I think are very dramatic. You've got Tom and Izzy's affair behind his wife Lorna's back. I think that's a really interesting storyline. You've got Kim being assaulted by a very villainous pupil, Lewis Seddon. You've just got a lot of storylines which really work in this series. Plus, you've got the death of student Adam Dearden, which then brings a whole host of characters into the frame because you have fellow student Dante being sent to court for his murder and Chloe feeling guilty because she also helped cause the accident which resulted in Adam's death. So it's just one of those storylines which help bring all of the characters together. So for me, Series 1 was Waterloo Road on top form, and I can really understand why after Series 1 the show would go on to become such a staple of the BBC. Next we have Series 2, the sequel. Now, Series 2s are important because it really does show if the show has staying power or not. For me, Series 2, it goes in the C tier. Now, I think Series 2 is an enjoyable series. I do enjoy it a lot. The main thread for Series 2 is the fact that businessman Roger Aspinall is trying to turn the school into an academy, and we have all the threats about whether Jack's going to be able to stay on as head teacher or not, or whether the curriculum's going to change, and actually a lot of fears about a school which is in the state sector being taken into the private sector. Obviously in 2007 this was quite a big deal. Now that academies are more common, but at the time academies were not that common in the UK. New characters, we get school secretary Davina Shackleton. I really enjoy her character in Series 2. She's a very beautiful character, that is for sure. And I do like her romance with Jack Rimmer. Her romance with a student is a bit kind of dodgy, especially as we're supposed to feel sympathy for her, even though she was having an affair with a student, which she knew was against the law. So I don't feel that much sympathy for her. New students, we get Brett Aspinall. I really enjoy Brett Aspinall as a character. He's such a cocky, arrogant, posh boy. And I think he just really works because he just rubs a lot of the teachers up the wrong way. And then you've got Maxine Barlow. I really enjoy Maxine Barlow. Not only was she a character who I think redeemed Steph Haydock, because Steph was not really very likeable in Series 1. But by Series 2, Steph becomes kind of a motherly figure for Maxine. And I think that those two work very well together. A number of the storylines in Series 2 are good. They're just nowhere near as good as Series 1. You have the continuation of the love triangle between Tom, Izzy and Lorna, and I'm not a massive fan of it because I just think Lorna should go away. She seems to be quite an unlikable character. Even when she's diagnosed with MS, which is a very tragic storyline, I just think they should have chosen a character a bit more likable than Lorna, because after the way she's behaved throughout the early part of Series 2, you don't have a lot of sympathy for her. But Series 2 does end on a very tragic note. We see the death of Izzy Redpath after she was stabbed. Izzy, definitely one of the standout characters from the first 2 series, and her death at the end of Series 2 is very tragic, that's for sure. Series 3. Now for me, Series 3 is when Waterloo Road really starts to get into its groove, and I'm going to put Series 3 in the B tier. I think that Series 3 is a very strong series of the show. Head teacher Jack Rimmer is replaced by the more professional Rachel Mason. Jack obviously decided to pay middle-class parents to send their kids to the school, which the Board of Governors don't like because it's clearly bribery. So Jack is suspended and resigns with immediate effect. But he's replaced by Rachel Mason. And Rachel is a very different head teacher to Jack. She's a lot more professional. And I have to say it's a welcome change. While I liked Jack as a head teacher, Rachel, I just think she's great because she's able to tackle some of the more lazy members of staff. She goes up against Grantley Budging quite a lot, which is great to see, because during the early few series, Grantley weren't a very likeable character. He was quite a mean and lazy, cynical teacher, and it's great to see Rachel kind of give him what he deserves at some points. We get new teachers in this series. We get Deputy Head Eddie Lawson. I think Eddie's a great character, a very down-to-earth deputy who doesn't always play by the rules, but someone who cares very much about the school. We get new English teacher Jasmine Qureshi. I really enjoy Jasmine as a character, and I also enjoy her storylines. I like how she is set up for hitting a student even though she didn't do it. I really think that was an interesting storyline which made you feel a lot of sympathy for her. And we get new drama teacher Matt Wilding, and I enjoy Matt as well. You know, I think his storylines, because he was the first gay teacher to be introduced, his storylines about coming to terms with the fact that the kids will know about his sexuality, I think is quite interesting, because it is true that, you know, in schools especially, the idea of a teacher being gay, especially in the time that Series 3 was set around 2007, 2008, it would have been a point of ridicule. So I think it's interesting that they chose to do a storyline like that. And we get a whole host of new students as well. We get Bolton Smiley, Paul Langley, Carla Bentham, Alicia Dillon, Danielle Harker and Michaela White. They're all great characters. I especially like Carla. She has Asperger's syndrome, and I think it's great that Waterloo Road was inclusive of her in particular in this series. But all of the new additions to the student cast are welcomed. They're all great actors, and it's great to see that kind of talent in the show. And I enjoy a lot of the storylines in this series as well. We have Chloe and Brett's affair, even though Chloe's married to Dante, and Brett is Chloe's sister Mika's boyfriend, so that's a very dramatic storyline which I love. We get Grantley's gambling, which makes you feel a bit of sympathy for Grantley. His wife is introduced, Fleur, who's a lovely character. And we also have Rachel being blackmailed by a builder because she used to be a prostitute, and he blackmails her for that. And I think that's a very interesting storyline which makes Rachel quite a vulnerable character. Plus it ends with a school fire, and you know, you gotta love a dramatic storyline like that, one which puts all of the characters at risk. Next we have Series 4. I'm going to put Series 4 in the B tier. I think that Series 4 is a great follow-up to Series 3. In terms of quality, I'd say it's very similar. We've got head teacher Rachel. She has to deal with the aftermath of the school fire and her identity being revealed. She finds a nemesis in the form of the Board of Governors director Ralph Meller. Ralph is a very two-dimensional villain, one who's not really developed very well, and it's never really highlighted why he has such a problem with Rachel. So they could have done a better job with Ralph, but you know, he's a decent threat. And we also have Rachel find love with Eddie, and I have to admit I really do enjoy Rachel and Eddie together. Out of all of Rachel's love interests, her romance with Eddie is great. But obviously it's complicated by the fact that Eddie was seeing Rachel's sister, Melissa, and Melissa ends up getting pregnant. So by the end of the series, Rachel decides that there's just too much going on and that Eddie needs to focus on Melissa and his future child. So Eddie decides he's going to leave the school, which is very sad. I was very upset to see Eddie leave because he was a great character. Series 4, I'd say the primary new characters for Series 4 is the introduction of the Kelly family. You have alcoholic mum Rose Kelly, who's a great addition to the cast. I love Rose. You've got older son Marley, who's very mature. You've got psychotic son Earl, who is a great character, who's actually responsible for killing his girlfriend Maxine Barlow, which is a very tragic storyline, and one of those storylines which I have to admit, the more you watch it, the more you get upset by it, because it just shows how a student's death can have a massive impact on the school as a whole. And you also have the other Kelly children, Sam and Denzel, who I have to admit don't get as much screen time as the others, but they're still decent additions to the class, that's for sure. In terms of the storylines of this series, you have the return of Kim Campbell. And I have to say, Kim is at her most unlikable in Series 4 when she returns with the baby who she smuggled through customs from Africa. And, you know, Kim's just someone who doesn't take a lot of responsibility in Series 4. And I just find her quite unlikable in Series 4, I have to be honest. And we also have Tom and Davina breaking up. They got together during Series 3, which was a decent romance, but Tom decides that he has feelings for Rose, and Davina decides, you know, she's not going to go through being second best, so she leaves the school altogether. Next we have Series 5, and Series 5 marked a massive shake-up in terms of the cast, and I'm going to put Series 5 in the A tier. I know a lot of people think that Series 5 is the best series of the show. I don't think it's the best series, but it's definitely up there as one of the most well-written stories in the show's history. As I said, there's a massive overhaul of the cast because Waterloo Road merges with the private school John Foster's, and we get a whole host of teachers that are used to working in a private school come into Waterloo Road, and I have to say they're all great additions. Now, I said about in Series 4 how I thought Rachel and Ralph's rivalry weren't handled very well, but the same cannot be said between Rachel and new executive head Max Tyler. I love Max. He is a great villain. Someone who says he's doing it for the kids, but you can tell he's just out for himself. And he has a massive problem with Rachel. And he's not afraid to show that whatsoever. And it's a shame he's only in 10 episodes because Max is just such a great character. Someone who at points you can kind of see a very interesting backstory there. It's just a shame they don't really delve into it. But even so, he's a great villain, that's for sure. We also get a whole host of new teachers. You've got Deputy Head Chris Smead. I love Chris. I think he's a great character. You've got Food Tech teacher Ruby Fry. Ruby is a very annoying character, I have to admit. One of those characters who thinks she's kind of above everyone else. You've got new teacher Helen, who is just an absolute failure. But she only got the job because she was sleeping with Max. And you've got foreign languages teacher Joe. And I have to admit, Joe is a very good character as well. I do like Joe. You've got new students. You've got Josh, who is Tom's long-lost son. Which, you know, after the departure of Chloe and Mika in Series 3 and Series 4, it's good that Tom now has a kid to look after, because I think Tom works best when he's in a more paternal role. And you also have Amy, you have Lindsay, who is a great character. Jenna Coleman portrays her, and the storylines she's involved in are very dramatic, and Coleman delivers some memorable performances. And you've got Finn Sharkey as well, a new bad boy who is just great. I love Finn. He's a lovable rogue. He's the definition of a lovable rogue, and a character who I think is one of the most iconic in the show's history, that's for sure. The one issue I do have with Series 5 is I feel that some of the departures are a bit underwhelming. Head teacher Rachel, she gets married to old flame Adam and just chooses to depart the school to start a new life. You've got Steph Haydock, an original character who just seems to leave without kind of an ending. She doesn't really get an ending, which was a bit annoying because Steph, as I said, was an original character. You think they'd have more respect for her. And Kim Campbell, she gets pregnant with Max's baby, and she goes on maternity leave, but then she kind of leaves off screen. You don't see her return in Series 6, which was a little bit annoying because Kim, once again, was an original character. You think they'd have more respect for her. We then move on to Series 6. I'm going to put Series 6 in the C tier. Now, Series 6 sees the introduction of a new head teacher in Karen Fisher, and we see the introduction of the Fisher family. I have to admit, Karen is the head teacher I dislike the most. And, you know, Amanda Burton, great actor. I can't fault her performances. I just find Karen quite a selfish and unlikable character, especially at points in Series 6. You have her husband, Charlie, who is having an affair, which, makes him quite an unlikable character as well. You have Jess, her daughter, who keeps sleeping around with loads of different people. You have her son, Harry, who suffers bulimia. And you have her oldest, Bex, who ran away from home and then returns halfway through this series with a massive secret. So it's fair to say that the Fisher family bring a whole lot of drama to the show. You get quite a few new students. You get Jonah and Ruth, who are homeschool students who come into the school. You have Ronan Burley, who is a very cheeky character, but quite a lovable character. You have Vicky McDonald, who is quite a troubled character. And then you have new bad boy Carl Stack, who is a decent addition. I do like his rivalry with Finn because they're two bad boys being put up against one another, so that's very interesting. Some of the storylines in Series 6 I think are a bit hit and miss. You have the same-sex classes, which they do halfway through the series, and I have to admit I don't agree with that whatsoever, and it's kind of forgotten by Series 7, so I really don't understand where they were going with that, to be honest. And then you also have the teacher-pupil romance between Spanish teacher Cheska Montoya and student Jonah Kirby. And I have to admit, I do enjoy this storyline. It's very dramatic. It has a lot of plot twists in it. I feel like they might over-romanticize it because they end up getting married in the series finale. And it's kind of like they're almost saying there's nothing wrong with it, when obviously a teacher having an affair with a pupil is against the law. So there is a lot wrong with it. So Series 6, it was a decent enough series, but compared to Series 5... It just didn't live up to that series, I don't think. Now, Series 7, I'm going to put Series 7 in the A tier. Series 7 is my favourite series. I adore Series 7. Head teacher Karen Fisher, she struggles with the school during the first 10 episodes. The school is at threat with closure again, and it's actually given an official notice. And by the end of those 10 episodes, Karen is sacked from the school. And in Series 11, we're introduced to new superhead Michael Byrne. And Michael Byrne is my favourite head teacher. I think he's a great character. He comes with a whole host of storylines. He's recovering from being stabbed by a pupil at his former school. He has an affair with his deputy, Sean Diamond, even though she's married to fellow teacher Jez. And then he gets run over after being stalked by his head of English, Linda. So it's fair to say Michael goes through a hell of a lot in Series 7, but I do find him a very interesting character, a character with a lot of layers, and I think Alec Newman is a great actor, so I love seeing him in this series. Series 7 does feel like two different series. You've got the first 10 episodes, which has Karen Fisher as head teacher, and then you have the next 20 episodes, which has Michael Byrne as head teacher. So they do feel like two different series. New teachers, you get a whole host. You get Rob Scotcher, who he's only in 10 episodes, but he's a great character. You have nerdy, geeky maths teacher Chalky, who is great. I love Chalky as a character. Then you have several other characters. You have Eleanor, you have Sean, you have Jez, you have Linda, you have Nikki. I don't have a real problem with any of these characters. I think they're all well portrayed by the actors, they're well cast, and their storylines are interesting, that's for sure. You get quite a few new students as well. You get Tarek Siddiqui and his sisters Trudy, and I have to admit I do enjoy both of those characters. And you get Jez's children Maddie and Zach, who are both good characters as well, especially Maddie. I have a soft spot for Maddie. I think she's a really good character. And there's a whole host of storylines in Series 7. There's too many to go over in this video. To pick out a few, you've got Sam's cancer storyline, which was a very emotional storyline. Sam Kelly, you know, a much loved character by Series 7, been in the show since Series 4. Her death in Series 7, especially from cancer, is very tragic and one of the most emotional storylines that Waterloo Road has ever done. You've got the school being threatened with closure, and eventually it is closed. Waterloo Road is shut down. They lose the battle, which is very upsetting, but for some reason, Michael gets a phone call from an ex-pupil of his, Lorraine Donegan, who is now very rich, and informs him she intends to open a school in Scotland and wants him to be head teacher. So what a coincidence. Michael has a way to take all of the teachers and students to Scotland with him. And we also get gang warfare in the last 10 episodes of the series, and I think that they handled the idea of gangs very well. Next we have Series 8. Now Series 8 really does feel like a new dawn because it was the first series set in Scotland. Did it pay off? Kind of. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Series 8, we see head teacher Michael Byrne and businesswoman Lorraine Donegan open the school in Scotland. We get quite a few new teachers. You've got Christine Mulgrew, who's an alcoholic, but Laurie Brett is one of the best actors Waterloo Road has ever had, and Christine is such a layered and complex character that I have to admit she is also one of the most memorable characters the show has ever had. We get history teacher Audrey McFall, who I really enjoy. I think she's a great history teacher. You've got catering teacher Maggie. And I have to admit, Maggie is great. I didn't mention this in Series 7, but Maggie gets with Grantley in Series 7, and they get married in Series 8, and it's a great pairing. I do really enjoy Grantley and Maggie together. They're complete opposites in many ways, but they do work together for some reason. I have to admit, for me, Series 8, it's a strange series. When it starts, you have mostly characters who were in the Rochdale series. By the end of Series 8, most of the characters are now characters who were introduced when the show moved to Scotland. So it feels very much like a transition series. And a lot of the new students I enjoy. I like Connor Mulgrew, I like Imogen Stewart, I even enjoy the Barry family, though they are kind of a rip-off of the more popular Kelly family. For me, Series 8 is an interesting series. By the end of the series, Michael has left and Christine has replaced him as head teacher. And in the series finale, we do have the death of original character Tom Clarkson, which was very upsetting. I remember watching this episode live and shedding a tear or two because it was a very emotional episode. Now we move on to Series 9. Now Series 9, I'm going to put it in the D tier. By Series 9, I feel like they were rehashing storylines that they had done before. You can clearly see the show was running out of steam by Series 9. Now I enjoy Christine as head teacher. I think she's a very underrated head teacher. But the writers, it's like they don't want her to be head teacher. We see her fight for the top job. She even has to fend off her deputy Simon Losley, who wants to be head teacher just like her. And she eventually gets the permanent job, but then they decide, as she's a recovering alcoholic, they decide to throw her off the wagon. And by the end of the series, she has got drunk at school and has lost her position as head teacher, which was a bit annoying, I have to admit, because I think Christine could have been a really good head teacher. We get new teachers in the form of Deputy Head Simon Losley. We also get Deputy Head George Windsor. I love George. He is a replacement for Grantley, who tragically dies during this series. The longest serving original character, Grantley's death, is probably the last great episode of the series, in my opinion. But George is a decent replacement, you know, a character who is very cynical and someone who really doesn't care about his students whatsoever. I have to admit, Series 9 is the series when they started to rehash a lot of storylines. You could just tell that they were running out of steam by Series 9. But that's nothing compared to Series 10. Series 10, F tier. They literally just recycle loads of storylines from the past. New head teacher Vaughan Fitzgerald, a decent character. Deserved better than Series 10, that's for sure. I'm not going to go on about Series 10 a lot. It's the weakest of the original series. Everyone just looks like they don't really want to be there anymore. You know, the writers clearly don't want to be there anymore. And so, yeah, Series 10, weakest of the series, and one I really never go back to watch unless I'm doing a marathon. Now, Series 11. Now, we were all in for a shock because Waterloo Road, which finished in 2015... it was announced that the show would be coming back in 2023 with a brand new series. And I have to admit, I was surprised that the BBC decided to make a new series of Waterloo Road. But I was very excited. But was Series 11 hit or miss? For me, it was a miss. I'm going to put it in the E tier. Now, Series 11, it did have potential. Don't get me wrong. I think it was great that they had Kim Campbell as head teacher. You know, an original character with a lot of history with the show. I think it was great that she was head teacher, and the return of former pupil Dante Charles was welcomed. But for me, Series 11, it was just a little bit off. A lot of the new characters are underdeveloped. And this series is only 6 episodes long. So you haven't got a lot of episodes to establish all these new characters. And I just feel like Series 11, it just missed the mark. Now, some of the new characters I enjoy, especially new students Danny and Kelly Jo. I think they are definitely the standouts in terms of the students. For me, Series 11, it showed promise that the revival could work, but it was still underwhelming, especially Chloe's death. I weren't a fan of Chloe's death, especially it occurred in the opening episode. You know, from Series 1 to 4, Chloe and Dante's love story was one of the pivotal storylines. And by the end of Series 4, Chloe gave birth to their daughter, Izzy, and they decided to leave for a new life. And they got a happy ever after. And then in the first episode of the revival, we see Chloe die, which was very upsetting. It was shocking, but shocking for the wrong reasons. So Series 11, it was just underwhelming. Now Series 12, I'm going to put Series 12 in the D tier. Series 12 is definitely a better series. It's more well written. The characters are starting to become more developed. Some of the new characters introduced I don't enjoy. New student Miles is probably one of the lamest villains they've ever had. He's your typical school bully, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the actor or if it's the writing, but he just feels very underwhelming. I know, compared to some of the other villains the show has had over the past, I just think that Miles is a bit of a letdown. Some of the storylines in Series 12 I enjoy. I love the return of Andrew Treneman, another original character who has a long history with Kim. It's great to see him return. The death of Danny was very tragic. Danny was definitely one of the standout characters since the revival, and his death at the end of Series 12 is very tragic. And I have to say, Preston's eating disorder storyline, it's something which Waterloo Road has tackled before, but I think they do a really good job with this storyline with Preston. It's one which goes on throughout the majority of Series 12, and I think it's very realistic, and clearly a lot of research went into making sure this storyline was portrayed correctly. Next is Series 13. Series 13 I'm going to put in the C tier. I think Series 13 is where the show starts to come into its own. Series 11 and Series 12 were a bit messy. Series 13 kind of becomes its own thing. We still have Kim Campbell as head teacher. She has to deal with Andrew's cancer, as well as taking the school into an academy trust. Certain teachers in this series, such as Joe, Val, Neil, and Coral, are starting to become iconic characters. I'm starting to understand who these teachers are and how these characters work in the series. We also get quite a few new students introduced. We get Bully Shuey, who is a great bully. He's one of those characters that you feel sympathy for him in one scene, and then in the next scene you think, oh, you're just a vile bully. So Shuey is a great character. And we also get Libby, who is Neil's daughter, who is quite a bitchy character in Series 13, but you can't not like her. I really enjoy those kind of bitchy characters that try and be nice when they're not. For me, Series 13 was definitely an improvement and the best of the revival up until that point. And next we get Series 14, the latest series. I'm going to put Series 14 in the B tier. And you will notice with the revival, each series since Series 11 has been getting better. Series 14 proved to me that the revival has finally found its feet. It's finally managed to become Waterloo Road again. And I'm so happy for that. We get new head teacher Steve Savage. Everyone was a little nervous about Jason Mansford being cast, because obviously when a comedian's cast in any show, there's a bit of concern because you think, oh, will he be able to handle the more dramatic storylines? But Mansford has really proven that he can act, and then Steve Savage is a great addition to the cast. He has to deal with his son Billy's bullying at the hands of Shuey. and the fact that Billy is responsible for the death of a student and Steve covers it up, which I have to admit is a very shocking storyline, and it's one which Waterloo Road has not covered before, so that already makes Series 14 more memorable. We get new characters in the form of maths teacher Nisha, and I have to admit, the revival has been missing a character like Nisha, who is kind of like a Grantley-esque character in the sense that she could not give a damn about her job. You know, she couldn't care about the students, she doesn't really care about her job, she just turns up, does her work and then goes home. But the show has been missing a character like that since the revival. There is also quite a few new deaf students introduced in this series, and I think that's great. I think it's great that Waterloo Road still champions diversity after all this time, and the deaf characters are actually really interesting, and I think it highlights deaf issues to people, especially in high schools, so I think they were a welcomed addition to the cast. The storylines feel a lot more dramatic and personal this series. They don't just do what they did in Series 9 and Series 10 where they rehash storylines. Series 14, it really does feel like they're doing storylines which they haven't attempted before, and I think that's why it's definitely the best of the revival so far. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. Now, you will notice for me that Waterloo Road's a very interesting series. The original 7 series set in Rochdale are all pretty good. You know, they're between S tier and C tier. We then get the Scotland series. You know, starts off in C tier and then steadily goes down to D tier and then F tier. That was when they really started just rehashing storylines and clearly running out of steam. And the revival started off underwhelming, but then slowly but surely, as they get more comfortable, it started to get better until the latest series is up with some of the strongest in the original Rochdale series. And if that trend continues, then hopefully by Series 15, we could be heading up to A tier, which would be great. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in another one. See ya!